Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Martial Arts Iceberg. Before we get back into it, I'd like to say thank you for the support on the video. It means a lot. And without further ado, let's get into the iceberg. And on to the third tier of the iceberg. And the first in this third tier is Kali. Kali, also known as Arnis, is a national martial art of the Philippines that focuses primarily on arm techniques, but also has an unarmed style. Kali is theorized to originate from India. However, it was passed down orally throughout the generations, as it was practiced by commoners who were illiterate and would be influenced by other martial arts that would come into contact with Filipino culture, including Silat, fencing, and other styles, along with many Chinese and Indian martial arts. The Spanish would become very interested in Kali, with reports of Spanish soldiers being defeated by Filipino soldiers. And the things that they cite are, there was one commander that was apparently killed using Kali. However, this claim was disputed because he was killed with spears, and spears aren't used in Kali. Anyways, Kali would integrate this form of Spanish fencing into itself to make it even better. And it has so much influence that it's said that the bladed style of Kali derives 40% of its influence from Spanish fencing. During the Spanish colonization, as swords would be banned, Kali would preserve the art by using sticks instead, which is what Kali is most known for today, with Filipino immigrants bringing Kali to California as far back as the 1920s. Now, Hema is the abbreviation of Historical European Martial Arts and is a form of martial art dedicated to preserving many old forms of European combat, primarily forms from 1300 to 1800 Common Era, and ones that typically have limited documentation on them. This includes a lot of fencing, and also includes wrestling and boxing. However, Hema competition is typically done with melee weapons. Despite this, though, you do see a lot of punching with the bucklers and shields. And I gotta be real, I don't know how Dana White picked slap fight. I like slap fighting, right? It's very cool seeing that slap fighters get the stage. However, I can't believe Dana White didn't choose literal night combat over just two people slapping. And apparently slap fighting is a success, so it's like, how could you not promote it? Like, it would be so insane. Hema competitions are wild. It's literally just a Dark Souls fight. It is some of the most fun competitions you'll see. I don't really need to explain too much here, but yeah, it is so cool. A little bit more lore, though. It would really become what it is in the 1880s, as many English-speaking countries, people from these countries, mainly history buffs, would attempt to recreate the martial arts in using it in competition. And it is so cool. Watch a Hema competition after this video, man. Dambe is a martial art from Nigeria that is very unique. It's very one of a kind. Dambe is used by the Hausa people and is used during harvest festivals for entertainment and for men to get ready for war. Dambe is fought with the rear hand, labeled the spear, being wrapped up in a sort of like cord wrap, and historically is dipped in resin mixed with glass. However, they obviously don't do this anymore. And the lead hand would be labeled the shield, and you could use the shield hand basically to set up posts with an open palm, and you're also allowed to hold and grab to the back of the head. The front leg is sometimes wrapped with a chain, and fighters can kick, but only with the rear leg. Matches would consist of 3 rounds, with rounds not consisting of time limits. However, rounds are ended due to a lack of activity, a fighter stopping during the round, or if the opponent touches the ground with a down, and downs would often be called kills. Dambe gotten a lot of traction in Nigeria as of recently, and Nigeria's government is planning on working to make the Dambe Sport Association, and they've been creating many tournaments outside of Nigeria even. It's pretty popular around Africa, and yes, it's actually what Doomfist is based off of. He is a Dambe fighter. It's very unique, and you could really see how it helps young men prepare for war too. The anomalies and how that actually can apply to a shield and a spear. Kalaripayattu, often known as Kali, we're going to go ahead and abbreviate it to Kalari, is a martial art originating from the Indian state of Kerala and is one of the oldest forms of martial arts in the world. In fact, it is theorized that Bodhidharma used Kalari and showed it to the Shaolin monks, and from there they would derive Kung Fu. Kalari dates back to 1600 to 300 BCE and is documented in Sanskrit and would move to northern India in the 600s. During the medieval era, the youth of Kerala would be trained in Kalari in a very Spartan-like manner, very different from modern India and their more pacifist nature. During the 1600s, Kalari would begin to fall into irrelevancy due to the rise of firearms, but it would be preserved in the Vatican Patukai, where Kalari heroes and their many journeys would be documented. In 1804, British would ban the martial art, which would force it to be taught in secret. During the 70s, Kalari would see a resurgence thanks to the surge of martial arts at the time, and it would happen to be thanks to the help of a 1937 book, Kalaripayattu, on Kalari, written by Sridharan Nair. Kalari would be practiced nowadays as an art for self-defense, but also for a form of dance, and is still going strong with the Kalari Academy opening as recently as 2021. Now, the Taekwondo section kind of made Tang Soo Do look like more of a transitionary art and something that would fade away over time. However, it actually is still practiced by several Korean martial arts groups with a focus on the elements of the original 9 kwans that may have been lost in translation due to the evolution of Taekwondo. So basically, they're trying to fill in the gaps of what was lost with Taekwondo and what was preserved with the older martial arts. Baguazhang is a form of Kung Fu that is stemmed from the same school that Tai Chi originated from. Baguazhang originates with Dong Haichuan, who learned it from a Taoist and a debatably Buddhist set of teachers, he would catch the eye of the emperor, who would allow him to be his bodyguard and would be an instructor. Dong Haichuan would instruct an array of famous disciples, who each developed their own separate style, despite all of them being taught by one master. And many practitioners today practice in Yin, Shang, and Liang styles. And that's pretty interesting that this guy was the master of all 9 of these styles. However, each of these students were taught in a way to only master one of them. Pankration is a Greek martial art that captures the eyes of historians and mixed martial artists alike due to its super similar appearance to MMA. Many Greeks in the 7th century BCE would write off boxing and wrestling, and they would talk about how it doesn't translate to a real fight, which I find that really funny because it's kind of what Pankration became. It's a real fight. Pankration was set off to combine boxing and wrestling, but it would also allow kicks, joint locks, and pretty much everything, with Pankration meaning total combat. Although knockouts were common, matches were typically ending in submissions and chokes, very similarly to MMA today. However, many matches would end in death. And also, you could break fingers, and if your opponent gives up because their hand's broken, well, that's a submission. Pankration is really well known due to its immense popularity at the time, and it was even an Olympic sport, with Pankratists having their epic fights immortalized in history. Pankration would also be used for military training, and there are many instances of Pankration being used on the battlefield using bites and kicks when their weapons would break. Pankration would carry on into the Roman Empire until it would meet its end in 393 due to its gladiatorial combat and many other sort of pagan activities and violent acts being banned by Emperor Theodosius I. And also, I want to put it out there were Olympic champions and Pankration, boxing, and wrestling at the same time, which is crazy because, like, the founder of Krav Maga, he was a national boxing and wrestling champion, but, like, wow. Like, that is very interesting. Lethwei is a Burmese martial art that is often considered the most brutal martial art around today. Lethwei really resembles Muay Thai, with one of the largest exceptions being its allowance for headbutts, giving it the title The Art of Nine Limbs. Lethwei is also practiced without gloves, only sometimes allowing hand wraps, leading to many lacerations to punches to the face. Lethwei goes back to the Pagan dynasty, where fighters would fight much like Lethwei matches today, with the exception of them having no draws. A fighter would fight until the other couldn't continue. Lethwei, like Muay Thai, is seen as a way to escape poverty, the last way out. And in 1996, Myanmar's sport ministry would introduce a modern rule set to Lethwei, and one championship would hold a Lethwei match in 2015. And they would later collab with the World Lethwei Championship to further promote the sport. And yeah, a lot of its aspects do actually come from the headbutts and the bare knuckle aspect of it. The bare knuckles aspect leads to a lot of cuts, so that also really leads to its bloody title. Glima is an Icelandic form of folk wrestling that would be created in Iceland, and commonly known for its waist grappling and variety of styles favoring technique over force, and the vice versa. Forms of glima would be a form of wrestling used by the Vikings and is documented in the Jonsbok, an Icelandic law book back from 1325. Glima can be split up into three variants, with trouser grip wrestling favoring technique and even forbidding the usage of brute force and strength, with an emphasis on sportsmanlike conduct, with backhold wrestling being more the use of strength over skill, and loose grip wrestling being much more aggressive and an emphasis on many holds. Trouser grip wrestling is the most widespread form of glima and is what people typically think of, using a specialized belt with many grips around the waist and legs. Loose grip wrestling is a split between self-defense and competition variants. The sport variant match ends with one opponent is standing and the loser is still on the ground. However, if both wrestlers are brought to the ground, the winner is determined by whoever gets up first while keeping the other wrestler grounded. Now, this one was a little bit hard to research, but seiwakai is a branch of karate created by 9th Dan Shiju Tasakai in 1971 and would be taught globally with a core user base in Brazil. In 1909, Brazil would open its borders to Japanese immigrants, and with them would come many Okinawan immigrants, primarily karate practitioners. Many of these immigrants would open schools, and Air Force members would spar with many of these karateka following World War II. And Brazil would produce many great karateka, with several Brazilians going on to win karate tournaments, with Seiwakai's Brazilian organization being founded by Ademir Ferreira de Costa, a world karate champion, who founded it due to many disagreements with Japan's Kyokushinkai organization. Muay Boran is the predecessor to Muay Thai and is way more violent than warlike. Muay Boran was developed by the Thai tribe for war and would evolve alongside Muay Thai. Muay Boran includes a lot more grappling, ground fighting, with many more deadly techniques that would not be carried over into Muay Thai, as it began as a competition art. Muay Boran nowadays is preserved, but primarily taught at seminars and is typically only used for self-defense. Silat is another blanket term like Kung Fu, as it encompasses hundreds of Southeast Asian martial arts, focusing on striking, joint manipulation, weapons, and/or combinations of each. Silat is preserved mostly through oral tradition, with evidence of its origins tracing back to the early Langkasa Empire. Silat, like Kung Fu, derives its styles from aspects of nature such as plants and animals, along with dance and human anatomy. Silat would be influenced by religions and martial arts of India and China, and over time would interact with Okinawan and Japanese martial artists over time. Silat would shift since the 80s and 90s as attempts were made to make Silat more compliant to Muslim beliefs. For example, in Malaysia, it is illegal for Muslim practitioners to chant mantras, bow to idols, or seek supernatural powers, which forced many schools of Silat to shift towards more Islamic customs. Kenjutsu is an umbrella term referring to multiple methods, techniques, and styles of Japanese sword fighting, and is the predecessor to Kendo. As katanas would have great cultural significance to Japanese culture, Kenjutsu would hold much significance to Japanese, even outside of wars. As of the Edo period, there would be over 500 Kenjutsu schools across Japan, with usage becoming more affordable and more appealing with the usage of bamboo practice swords. During the Meiji period, Kenjutsu would fall out of practice with the sword ban at the time, and the public would shift to Kendo. And also, it would become a little less practical due to firearms. Matrak is an Ottoman combat sport that closely resembles sword and shield fighting. Matrak originated in the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s and would use a patterned wooden sword and shields to replicate combat safely. And Matrak was designed in such a way that kids could play it for fun on the lawn, and soldiers could use it to prepare for war. Laamb is a form of Senegalese wrestling that is the natural sport of Senegal and allows the use of strikes with the hands. Laamb would be practiced by the Serer people and would be used for preparation for war. However, over time, it would begin to be used as a sport for honor, to prove manliness, to court wives, or just to have fun. Laamb has a rule set that is somewhat similar to sumo, albeit in a much larger ring, with the objective being to throw your opponent out of bounds, utilizing open-handed strikes to manage distance and to assert ring control. And opening up the fourth tier of the iceberg, we have Huka-Huka. Huka-Huka is a form of Brazilian folk wrestling used by the people of Xingu and is used during the ceremony of Karup in particular. Matches would start with both fighters on their hands and knees as they would be called forth by the chief of the ring, where the fighters would rotate, and once they would see each other during this rotation, the goal is to lift up your opponent and knock them back to the ground, kind of like a beetle. Esgrima Crioula, or Creole fencing, is a combat art used by farmers living in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina. Creole fencing uses weapons such as machetes, knives, a flail-like weapon known as the baladeira, and a poncho used for catching the opponent's offhand weapons. The practice of Creole fencing is initially used to kill animals, however, it would really help revolutionaries in the Farroupilha Revolution, the Federalist Revolution of Rio Grande do Sul, and in Argentina's revolution against the Spanish. Creole fencing would become widely spread and a very popular form of dueling as firearm bans would become widespread. And Creole fencing is often seen as a symbol for resistance, honor, and pride in South America, and schools in Argentina are trying to resurrect Creole as a sport, kind of like how Hema is, or I guess just like a form of fencing. And yeah, there was also a lot of debate over where it originated from. Oh, it originated from Uruguay. No, it originated in Argentina. So it's held in very high regard. Bokator is a Cambodian martial art that was used by the Khmer military and dates back to the 1st century. Bokator would be preserved for Cambodian history, with tales of fighters killing big cats being handed down thanks to the Angkor Wat temple complex, but would find massive setbacks. During the regime of Pol Pot, practitioners of any traditional martial art were exterminated, forcing practitioners to flee or hide, and this ban would continue during the Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia. San Kik-shan, a master of Hapkido and Bokator, would move to the US to teach Hapkido. While in the US, Kim would become very surprised that no one has heard of Bokator, inspiring him to return home in 1992, and in 2001, with permission of the king, would be able to teach Bokator. Thanks to San Kim-shan's efforts, Bokator was saved from erasure, being practiced by over 7,000 people across the world. Krabi-Krabong is a weapons-based martial art from Thailand that uses 2 swords alongside the use of kicks, throws, and joint locks. And Krabi-Krabong, we're just going to call it Krabi because that's what it's abbreviated as, was likely used alongside Muay Boran. And during the Burmese invasion of 1767, many historical records would be destroyed. However, the martial arts were passed down typically orally, allowing arts like Krabi-Krabong to survive despite aspects of its development being lost. The art would be used for combat until King Rama would phase it out with the usage of firearms, leading to Krabi-Krabong being used for sport, tradition, or an exercise. Parida is a form of Aboriginal wrestling based on many of the techniques used by the Aboriginal peoples, and is somewhat similar to sumo and Laamb with some key differences. Matches are separated between a dance stage and a combat stage. Whoever wins the dance stage will choose if they are the defender, starting inside of the circle with the intention of pinning down the attacker, or the attacker, starting outside of the circle with the intention of forcing out the opponent. Kind of like Squid Game. Parida is ancient, and the first tournaments date back over 10,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest martial arts in the world and probably the oldest surviving form of wrestling. Jogo de Pau is a Spanish and Portuguese martial art, utilizing a staff. As weapons bans would become commonplace, carrying staffs became commonplace among all classes, and this trend led for Jogo de Pau to become a widespread martial art, with it even being practiced in Brazil. Jogo de Pau was popular for its time, however it did begin to fade away, until the 70s boom in martial arts would revive it with niche practitioners happening in Portugal. However, it is still taught in Spain. Makulele is an offshoot of capoeira that resembles a mix of capoeira and Cali. Makulele is a dancing stick fighting martial art created by a capoeira feeder group in 1963. Makulele performers would typically form in a circle, usually with a singer and other instruments playing, with 2 performers performing a dance while clashing sticks on every 4th beat. Some capoeira schools will use makulele, sometimes with machetes instead of sticks, as a way that slaves may have used capoeira back in the day. Bakom is a Peruvian martial art that was made in the early 80s by Roberto Puig Bezada, a former Peruvian army commando, and it's very similar to Krav Maga in several ways. It's built for street fighting. Bakom is primarily a grappling art, yet is extremely violent, with lethal techniques including chokeholds, punches, the vulnerable areas, and even the use of weapons, primarily the use of hidden knives. And yeah, this video in the iceberg, it links a video when you click on it, and I just skimmed around in the video, and the dude was drilling if you had somebody throwing a boulder at you. And that I automatically fell in love with this martial. It is so awesome. Like, okay, we're gonna drill techniques. We're gonna drill takedowns, we're gonna drill this, and we're going to drill the good old boulder drill. I just found that awesome. Rakau is a martial art that is pretty much exclusive to the Maori people, using exclusively Maori weapons, such as the taiaha, a staff-like weapon designed for close quarters combat. And despite this martial art seeming so niche that it only works with some weapons, a large amount of practitioners exist and were nearly doubled between 2007 and 2016, going from 11,000 practitioners to 20,000 people, thanks to Mitamohi, a master in the martial art, who spread it very wide. As martial arts would be named after the god of war Mars, Montu would be named after the Egyptian god of war, and is a martial art used by the ancient Egyptians and is theorized to originate from the Nuba people of modern-day Sudan. This martial art is preserved through hieroglyphics, far outdating most other martial arts. Despite closely resembling karate and judo, it is highly theorized that this martial art is preserved as an ancient form of Nuba wrestling, and Nuba wrestling is still a thing. But there were many strikes that were discarded over time, as Nuba wrestling is considered very safe with very little injuries. So yeah, you could probably think of this as the ultimate evolution of a martial art into a more traditionalized sport type of martial art. And my other inclusion, thanks to that one person in the Reddit thread, Yagli Gures is a form of Turkish oil wrestling, but actually dates back 4,500 years in the past. The objective of Yagli Gures is to get an effective hold on your opponent, which is very hard given how each wrestler is oiled up, and some matches were said to go on for as long as 2 days. However, over time limits would be implemented depending on your weight class, and they would hold a maximum of 40 minutes. Now I'm gonna speed run the fiction section, as I feel it's not really important to dwell too much on this tier. Sorry to anyone who came here for the fictional martial arts. I feel that should be its own iceberg. But anyway, tier 5, starting with gun kata, being a form of martial arts pioneered by the film Equilibrium, and the type of martial art mixes close quarters, gun combat. You see this all the time in movies like The Matrix and all that. Kazama style karate doesn't exist. So this is a big nerd emoji. Mishima karate is this form of karate in Tekken found by Jinpachi Mishima and was used primarily by members of the Mishima family. Kazami martial arts is more Daitoru Jujutsu, Aki Jujutsu based, and Judo based. Senshado from Girls und Panzer is a martial art using tanks as weapons, so I guess just tank combat. Combat yoga represents the style that Dalsim from Street Fighter uses, allowing him to stretch parts of his body and cast fireballs. Hokutsu no Ken is a martial art used by Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star, using pressure points, ki blasts, and other superpowers. Shaq Fu is the powerful martial art used by Shaq in the Shaq Fu game, where he gets to use this to beat many enemies down. And Cobra Kai is a brutal form of karate stemming from the Karate Kid Cobra Kai universe. Miyagi-Do karate is a form of karate founded by Mr. Miyagi, focusing on peace and balance. And Eagle Fang is an offshoot of Cobra Kai. And yeah, sorry I especially did the Cobra Kai part kind of dirty because I want to watch it on my own. So I intentionally researched that one bad. So yeah, on to the next. And now we have reached the McDojo tier. These are all fake martial arts, and we're starting with EFO. EFO, commonly known as Empty Force, is a martial arts style that claims it can knock out an attacker without even making contact, using the opponent's ki against them. Many people tend to fall for EFO and end up wasting much of their money because they make themselves believe that these techniques work. However, no-touch knockout masters get absolutely destroyed when confronted by actual martial artists, and sometimes untrained people. And by untrained, I don't mean in martial arts. I just mean your average Joe can walk in and kick this dude's ass most of the time. It's a very sad thing. Argentine Pa Kua is an alleged pyramid scheme run by a Taekwondo practitioner who was trained in Baguazhang under a made-up Chinese master that teaches this apparent offshoot to unfortunate people who have no idea that this martial art won't actually happen in a real fight. They just end up wasting money on this alleged pyramid scheme martial art, and it really sucks. Russian slap is funny. Anyways, Russian slap uses a lot of very fast flaily slap and kick like movements, which you're basically just throwing yourself at your opponent, flailing your hands like a child. Please take boxing lessons if you are practicing this somehow. And now we are on to Dux Ryu Ninjitsu. Oh boy, it's Frank Dux time. Dux Ryu Ninjitsu is an offshoot of ninjutsu made by Grand Khan Master and Kumite Victor, Frank Dux. Now, please watch the Napoleon Blown Apart video on Frank Dux. I could not do it justice on this iceberg. However, Frank Dux claims to have fought in a martial arts tournament, kind of like the Maximum Tournament from Baki. Yeah, one of those types of things, where it was a full-on death match, with Dux coming up as the first Westerner to win the tournament with 56 knockouts and the fastest knockout punch at 0.12 seconds. To dwell on this one statistic for a little bit, Jorge Masvidal knocked out Ben Askren running at full force with a flying knee in 3 seconds, and Frank Dux used a punch, which I guess it's just like a ki blast. Like, it couldn't even you couldn't even cover that distance in that amount of time. Anyways, this would inspire the movie Bloodsport, and this movie would be huge. He would even be able to work on the movie, and became a cult classic in terms of giving him a platform to shill his lies, with the biggest one being Dux Ryu Ninjitsu. Dux Ryu Ninjitsu is a martial art taught to him by a ninjutsu master, and who is also a master at not existing at all, Senzo Tanaka, which would allow him to have a record of over 300 wins with no losses. A record that is not real. SQTS is an acronym for Survival and Quick Tactical Elimination System. Where the fuck did the E go? Shouldn't it be SQTES? Like, that even sounds a little bit better. Anyway, if you go through Detroit Urban Survival training videos, thinking that those look unrealistic, Try a flying armbar to disarm an attacker. Master Laamb made this self-defense system after watching working security in Brazil, where he would go on to create the system based on real-life situations. Best used against burglars who are frozen in place with no concept of situational awareness. This training video is crazy, man. And last but certainly not least, as I know it's going to ruffle a little bit of feathers, Systema. Systema, as best I could describe it, is if Krav Maga meets EFO. Systema is a Russian martial art founded by Mikhail Ryabko, who, surprise, has funny mind-freezing powers and tends to exist in make-believe land where you can try to knock someone out who's robbing you with Looney Tune powers. You know, you beat people who just stand there in place. Like, the drills are very static, and they have these really weird knife turn drills where you just turn with the knife blade. Like, yeah, sure, have fun with that. And although aspects and concepts of Systema work and are really interesting, a singular concept is just a concept. If your martial art is built on a crux of shit, it's pretty bad. And yeah, there probably are some really good Systema schools out there who actually utilize real martial arts to actually work. However, like, the founder being a scam artist really kills it for me, so I don't really know how you could really write it off. And yeah, like, if you are trying to progress Systema, then show it actually working and make an actual functional form of it, instead of, you know, defending these weird no-touch martial artists, man. Like, it's not cool. It's gonna get people killed. It has gotten people killed. Thank you, viewer. You have reached the yap part of the video. Thank you very much for watching. This is my first Iceberg. It's my first crack at it, and I decided to do a pretty interesting topic like martial arts. I really want to make more videos like these, Iceberg videos. I'm not really looking to get into the martial arts sphere, but I might cover a couple things like body. I find it fascinating that one man is like the cornerstone of so many Asian martial arts. I just find that insane. So I might cover stuff like that. But martial arts are all about learning. And I couldn't do many of these martial arts and their vast histories justice here. So if you find any of these martial arts interesting, look into them, man. Like, there's so much cool shit out there. You should go and find out. You can never learn too much about these martial arts out there. Just make sure you don't fall for a McDojo or a fake martial art, you know? But anyway, yeah, I would really appreciate it if you liked the video, like it, and subscribe, because I'm going to try to make more Iceberg videos. To those who watch the Showdown videos, I don't really like the direction the Showdown meta is going. I think it's a little too ban heavy. So I don't really want to play Showdown anymore, and I kind of want to pivot into this kind of content. Icebergs and stuff like that. So if you got any suggestions, let me know. If you liked it, like, and drop a sub, man. I'm going to be continuing to do this. I'll start research on the next one very soon. I got a couple icebergs that I find pretty interesting. So thanks so much. Yap session over, and bye for now.